You got this other guy here, I'm just an actor. I think he's got like an engineering degree or something, but he's no scientist. He's an actor. And Michio Kaku said when it comes to cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120th power. They're off by 10 to the 120th power. I'm kind of like, well, why don't you knock off 100 zeros and get back to us?
Theoretical physics uses math and theory in order to come up with or derive the fundamental laws of nature and to make conclusions from these laws. Yep, ideas and mathematics giving little to no weight to experiments or observations. Sounds fun, huh? Books have been written and questions have been asked because to some it has become obvious that physics has been stuck for years because the belief in beauty and math have become so dogmatic that it now conflicts with scientific objectivity. That a focus on mathematical elegance rather than reality has led the so-called science astray. It reminds me of a quote from Nikola Tesla, who of course was a real scientist, not a theoretical physicist, who said, "The scientists from Franklin to Morse were clear thinkers and did not produce erroneous theories. The scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality." Nikola Tesla. Things like dark matter, string theory, the Big Bang, quantum gravity, relativity, and so much more have all come from the minds of theoretical physicists. Let's list some of these theoretical physicists because maybe you've heard of some of them. Nicholas Copernicus, who formulated the Copernican principle that the Earth or human beings could not possibly be in a privileged position in the universe. Or Giordano Bruno, who told us that the stars are just like other suns. Or Galileo Galilei, who pushed the ideas of heliocentrism. Or Johannes Kepler, who came up with mathematical laws of planetary motion. Or Isaac Newton, whose cannon-shooting thought experiment gave rise to gravity. Or Christian Huygens, who in 1653 came up with the distance from Earth to the Sun when he guessed, yes, guessed, they say correctly by chance, the size of Venus, allowing him to measure the Earth to the Sun distance. Or Father George Lemaitre, the Jesuit, who came up with the idea of the Big Bang. Or Henry Cavendish, who used balls in his shed to correctly come up with the mass and weight of the Earth. Or Max Planck, who was the originator of the quantum theory. Or Albert Einstein in relativity and the bending of space-time. To more recently, Lawrence Krauss, who tells us that something can come from nothing if you have gravity. Or Michio Kaku, who tells us all about string theory. Of course, there are thousands more. To see a pretty decent list, check out the link in the description to Wikipedia, where you can see the many other names like Stephen Hawking, Richard Feynman, Ernst Mach, Max Born, Ernest Rutherford, James Clerk Maxwell. The list goes on and on. But I want to come back to one in particular to help us answer our question, and that is Michio Kaku. In a recent interview, Michio Kaku said the following. Now listen carefully, as I believe he gives us the answer pretty much straight up.
You're not going to believe this. In science, we always say that you make observations, you have a theory, you go make more observations, and it's a very, very tedious process. Wrong. Nobody that I know of in my field uses the so-called scientific method. In our field, it's by the seat of your pants. It's leaps of logic. It's guesswork.
In that quote, I believe we find our answer. He said, plain as day, that nobody that he knows of in his field, and his field is theoretical physics, uses the so-called scientific method. Why is that so important? Well, it is so important because when we look at the definition of pseudoscience, we see clearly and everywhere that by definition, pseudoscience is a collection of beliefs or practices mistakenly regarded as being based on the scientific method. Yes, pseudoscience consists of statements, beliefs, or practices that are claimed to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. One more time, in case you missed it, from Michio Kaku himself.
Wrong. Nobody that I know of in my field uses the so-called scientific method.
And when you don't use the scientific method, what you practice is no longer called science. It's simply called pseudoscience.
In our field, it's by the seat of your pants. It's leaps of logic. It's guesswork. Guesswork. Guesswork.
Guesswork. Just great. And do some research on the difference, and you will see what we are being fed as factual and reality is simply guesswork. This chart shows the characteristics of pseudoscience versus actual science. Pseudoscience avoids falsifiability. It has vagueness in measurement. It takes what is unproven as false equals true. It has confirmation bias. It spends money and resources without care and has a reversed burden of proof. Sounds a lot like the Big Bang, universe expansion, dark matter, relativity, space-time, black hole science, unification theory, the theory of everything, supersymmetry, string theory, gravity, and on the list goes. So next time you hear these theoretical physicists talking nonsense, make sure you remember that the evidence speaks for itself. But it's up to you to decide. Is theoretical physics pseudoscience? I think the answer is clearly yes. Or you can continue to believe these guys and take the things they say as fact, like when we asked Michio Kaku to explain string theory.
Because we have a theory called string theory. It is fantastic. It is incredible. It has astounded the world of mathematics and physics. And now you can't move in the physics world without bumping into somebody who wants to talk about the 10th dimension, the 11th dimension, the multiverse, hyperspace, time travel. All the things that were once considered science fiction are now centerpiece in our understanding of the nature of everything.
Yes, the 11th dimension, the multiverse, hyperspace, and time travel, things that are so clearly science fiction, are now centerpiece in our understanding of reality.
Through your career and your writing and your acting, you've inspired so many people to enter the sciences. How do you balance science with science fiction?
They're both the same. I've been discussing time and warping time and time-space with some famous scientists. I'm doing something up in Canada which may sell, they may sell that show called The Truth is in Our Stars. And I've talked to Michio Kaku and David Suzuki, and I'm going in a couple of weeks to talk to Dr. Stephen Hawking. And I tried to get through his book, A Brief History of Time. It's not brief. And it doesn't have much to do with history. And everybody I've met who is acquainted with the subject, I'm continually asking, look, I hear space-time all the time. No, space-time, it's space-time. That without space, without time, it's time and the space is the time.
Hard to comprehend what it is.
Well, I don't comprehend what it is, so I ask these very important people who are working in the field, what is space-time? And they say, well, the gravitational force takes the photon of a light and it bends the photon of the light. So without space, without time, you cut the time that comes. I said, well, wait a minute. If in 13, and I said this to Dr. Kaku, in 13.5 years, he says, no, 13.8 billion years. He corrected me by 0.3 billion years. If that photon, I said to him, if that photon of light at that farthest galaxy takes 13.8 billion years to reach my eye, isn't that time? And he said, yes, but there's space-time and the time and the space, and the space is the time. And I couldn't understand, my opening sentence to everybody, including it will be to Dr. Hawking, what is space-time? And I can't. And I know 17 people just raised their hands. I'll tell you about space-time. But it's a concept that I just can't get through my head.
Well, you can understand time, the passage of time.
Are you going to explain to me what space-time is?
Yes. And you can understand the idea that there's space, there's a distance between you and these 6,000 people.
Wow. You said that with a measure of pride, too.
Yeah.
Creation, 6,000 people are in the audience.
But it takes a certain amount of time
Yes.
for you to pass from here all the way over to the other side of the auditorium.
Right, that's space.
That is time going, time going through space.
You see, that's not what they mean at all. That shows me that you have no idea. I mean, so the guy said, one of the gentlemen said, well, there are three dimensions: space, length, width, right? And then you add the concept of time.
As the
so
fourth
something
dimension.
happens within that space, you got time. That's the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I get that. Something happens within a cube, and you have time, and then you have length and breadth and width. And I get the, what's the fifth dimension, I said.
That's a fantastic band.
A fantastic band. That was my first thing. So I said, just give me another, because he said there's 11, then he said there's 17, and then I heard lately there's 26 other spaces, dimensions,
multiverses.
No, wait a minute. So I said, well, just give me one other dimension. I don't care about 16 or 17 or 26. What is the fifth dimension? Give me another dimension. And the answer is, we can't conceive of that.
You know, right.
So
that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
well, it doesn't mean it does exist. You know, so I mean, so I said to Dr. Kaku, he said, it's in the, because he's working on string theory. You know about string theory.
Yeah, and I find that incredibly confusing too.
But we're not talking about the stuff you wrap a package about, Adam. It's vibration of some kind in a string. Okay? So I said, he said, it's like music. I said, well, I understand an orchestra with vibrating instruments. I got that. What do you play? What's your instrument? What do you do? When you get up in the morning, doctor, what do you do? And he says, it's all in my head. I think. I said, well, how do you prove what you're thinking exists? Because it's all theory. He said, well, I've got this very elegant
numbers, equations.
Yeah. Very E, B divided to 7 to 4. It's all in his head. How do you prove a black hole? How do you know those gravitational waves proved the collision of two black holes?
Somehow, eventually, they are able to observe phenomena.
No, they can't observe. It's too far away. It's too theoretical.
They're telling us that there's all of these different Earth-like planets out there, right? How many of you guys have been following the news on that? You know, they keep saying, that video I just showed you a minute ago, really all they were looking at is a couple of, grace blocks. What's even worse, though, is how far away these things are. How far away these things, and how far away they say that they're looking, right? Do you know how far a light year is? 1 light year is approximately 6 trillion miles. They're telling us we're looking across thousands of light years. 3,000, that's 3,000 times 6 trillion. Oh, it gets worse than that. They said that they saw a black freaking hole at 55 million light years away. 55 million times 6 trillion. You got a telescope that can see that far? Zoom in on the moon right now and read me the serial number on the bumper of the buggy. Right now, or shut up. It's outrageous. I mean, it's like every month they're trying to see how much further they can push the envelope. How stupid and gullible are we? But that's the evidence we're all using for what we used to believe, or what some of you may even still believe to be true about our cosmos.
How do we know what they're saying is true? You know what it really is? It's all science fiction.
So does that make you a skeptic?
No, well, science fiction says, this is a story that I'm making up. And there's this thing called wormholes. And that's a science fiction concept. Although these scientists say there are wormholes. How do you know?
The mystery of science fiction is what I'm talking about. Science and science fiction are essentially the same.
Why are we listening to these people? Well, in conclusion, what's the motivation? This is just my opinion. First, get people to doubt Yahuwah's word by destroying the very foundation of our Bible, Genesis, specifically the creation account. Number 2, set up a new paradigm where God is out and science is in. Evolution removes Yahuwah from the equation. Number 3, when evolution finally runs its course and becomes utterly bankrupt, introduce the idea of intelligent design, but deny the true designer his due credit and place it rather on ancient aliens. How many seasons are they up to now? That TV show on the History Channel? Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. Think we're being programmed for something? Promote the ancient alien theme as much as possible in all forms of media by perpetuating the concept of Earth as a tiny blue marble orbiting an average sun and an average galaxy among trillions of other galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. With so much potential for life to exist in such a vast expanse, the idea of alien scientists being our creators seems a lot more plausible over time and heavy indoctrination. And number 5, the stage is now set for our alien creators to return and bestow upon us their miracles, signs, and wonders in order to convince all the more that all religions are false. We then put our trust in them. Finally, when Christ does return, we are all convinced that he is the enemy and our united world gathers together to make war with him. The end has been declared from the beginning. I submit to you that this is an important topic, and there's probably good reason why, after all this time, 500 years of the Copernican revolution, why are we talking about flat Earth in the years 2015 through 2019 of all things? Could it be that we are going to need to understand and take a stand for what the Word of God says? Remember that we sang that song? Sing it again. The B-I-B-L-E. Are you going to stand alone on the Word of God? Again, don't believe what I've said here. I've tried to show you as many scriptures as I could, and there's a lot more. If I had more time, that I could have done so. When they tell me I got 2 hours to present, I'm like, yeah, cool. At least I got 2 hours. There's so much more to talk about, and I think it's important. I do not think this is theological junk food. And again, the fruit proves it. Why are atheists coming in? Why are so many people coming into this and getting into Torah? Now, many people in the standard Christian world don't like that. They're making hit pieces against me on a regular basis. They are actually calling the Torah witchcraft and the doctrine of devils. Well, people are getting into this because this whole thing starts with Genesis, which is in the Torah, by the way. And when you look at Psalm 19, it says, the heavens declare and the firmament declares his handiwork. This is an important issue to him. He didn't start the narrative talking about the temple. He didn't start the narrative talking about Israel or Jerusalem or who's the chosen people. He gets to that eventually, but Genesis chapter 1 starts off with, this is how I built this place, and I put you in it. The earth is the center stage main attraction. Everything else is for the benefit of the earth. Everything else. I think he's trying to tell us something. Thank you. Thank you.